Becky and I are going to be sharing some stories today. We both been in real estate a very long time, and so we've seen a lot of things and a lot of people. We have the privilege of being in people's homes intimately, right?
Yeah.
Having conversations with them about things, in particular, people who are dealing with issues related to getting older and where they're going to live as they get older and how they make those adjustments. And so that's one of the reasons we do this topic is, even though maybe our area of interest or scope or career path is real estate, all of these other things play a role in those decisions. Have you found that to be pretty true?
Yes, and I have found that, the trajectory that you think you're going to be on can change pretty quickly, right? And you need to pivot.
Yeah. And we're in the middle of pivoting with them, right? Yeah. So our goal is to help people make that change a little easier if they have to make it, and maybe not have to make a change if they don't have to through that. All right, so everybody has a handout on the table in front of them. And ideally, it says the truth about living to 100, a new reality. And then I had Danielle add a word to that on the slide, a new and what? Important reality. There's actually several that we're going to talk about, and in the course of doing this, when I say important, what constitutes important? Well, nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, I think people don't think it's realistic. It's really far away.
Or they're in denial.
Sometimes we're in denial.
Mostly men, but just saying. I have to do that, right? Okay. So, especially for Curtis up there with our vest, because he knows, right? That was a jab for Curtis.
But truly, women are planners, right? Women are planners, and they think about all the different things that might happen, and men are just, what's for dinner?
Yeah, except for my husband. How did I get one that was a planner and I'm not, right? Yeah. So guys, there's a couple things that come up for us, and I want to give you a quick vocabulary lesson because we do have a lot of educators and retired educators in the room. So we're going to do a quick vocabulary lesson. Vocabulary lesson of the month. I learned a new word yesterday. Interesting. Yesterday I learned a new word. That's when I added this slide. The word was nonagenarian. How many of you know what nonagenarian is until today? Now you know. A nonagenarian is somebody who has lived to be 90 years or older until they turn 100, and then they become a what? Centenarian. We've heard centenarian before. That's in the papers, and we hear about that pretty regularly. And so then I got curious. Well, what are the other genarians? And so I looked it up, and Google gave me the rest of them. I knew octogenarian, and I knew supercentenarian, and some of these, right? But looky there. So we got quadragenarian if you're in your 40s, and quintagenarian if you're in your 50s, and sexagenarian. I know you guys will like that one, sexagenarian. That one's good. It's not what you think it is. Septuagenarian in your 70s, octogenarian in your 80s, nonagenarian in your 90s, centenarian in your hundreds, and then if you're a supercentenarian. Can you believe that the supercentenarians, there are hundreds and hundreds of them that are 114 right now?
It's insane. No,
it's insane. And as a matter of fact, I want to introduce you to somebody that is, let me come back to that slide, but this is somebody that some of you may know, Lois. Lois is the grandmother, she calls her Mima, of the lady in the front there, Jennifer, who's taking that selfie of her grandmother at age 110 this past year. Jennifer was one of our very first education partners with Oklahoma Hospice back in 15 or 16, whichever year we started that. This is her grandmother, and one of the first seminars that we did, her grandmother came to the seminar. She'd been right around 100. She was still knitting. She had her knitting with her, and she came in and she sat through the seminar, and she came up afterwards, so it was very interesting. And I thought it was very interesting that she was there, and she was 100 years old. Now she's 110. Quick story about her. When I reached out to Jennifer to say, hey, how's your grandma doing? I'm doing this topic again on living to be 100. Jennifer said, oh, she's doing great. She said she moved to assisted living this year. really? I said. She said, yeah. She said, I'll send you a picture. And I don't have it. I couldn't find the actual picture. There was a picture of her sitting in her wheelchair with an assistant of a staff member pushing her to the reception desk of the assisted living. And she said, here's what the conversation sounded like. The staff member said, what would you like to do today, Lois? And Lois said, well, I need to see the schedule of events. So he said, okay, here's the schedule of events. And he showed her the calendar and he said, which one would you like to go to? And she looked at him and said, well, all of them. And so she is 110. She's going to every activity during the day at her community. She's doing chair exercises. She's doing yoga. She's doing whatever's going on that day. And she's 110. So, do we have any excuses? Do we have any excuses? Well, we do, but when you think about those excuses, I want you to think about Lois. All right, think about Lois. And then you'll be interested to see, we also always look up who is the oldest living individual in the U.S. Naomi Whitehead, who is age 114 in Greenville, Pennsylvania, is currently the oldest living individual in the United States. And she is just by a few days, actually. There's several right behind her, right, vying for the next position. And she seems to be kicking right along and doesn't plan on going anywhere anytime soon. So, all right, so have I convinced you yet that we are going to possibly live to be 100? Yeah. Becky, you want to do a quick survey?
So yes, I want to know, there's 3 choices. Out in the room, who's excited about the possibility of living to 100? Who would like to live to 100? Okay. Who does not want to live to be 100? Okay. Who didn't really know? Not real sure. Okay, that's about what the survey it was about thirds that.
It was. It's about thirds. The academic studies that we looked at showed that when surveyed, no matter how big the number was, whether it's 1,000 people or 100 people, there's about a third, and a third people yes, no, and the criteria, we could talk about just briefly. Is the criteria is usually if I am healthy, I don't mind living to be 100. If I'm not healthy, then I just soon go. Does that make sense? And so I think we can all probably agree with that sentiment, but there were some other things too. If you're interested in those kind of things, you can write on your feedback form that you'd be curious about those surveys, or not surveys, the studies, and I have PDFs of those that Danielle can send to you if you'd like a copy of them. They're just interesting surveys that have been done over the years, studies. Okay.
Yep.
Very good. So some quick stats for you, just really quick, just to get us rolling, and then we'll dive into the content. Now I think everybody's here. You probably can't read that because of the color now that I'm looking at it from this distance, but Becky, you looked it up too, about how many of our centenarians do we have now?
Okay.
About 100.
About 101.
Yeah, about 101,000. Yeah.
And if you look, in the 1950s, it was 2.3. So think about that change in half a century. That's pretty.
Yeah, and they actually said too, the projections, the 400 and some odd thousand in projections, they think is low, too, that one said. And so
lots of contributing factors to that.
100%, yeah. I made this joke one time, and I'll just share it because I'd say it's a joke, but it's really not. So why people are living to be 100, right? Healthcare. Mm-hmm. And by the way, we're preaching to the choir in here because I'm going to just share a little known fact. Many of you may be in denial that you might live to be 100 because your parents lived to be however old they lived to be. But here's the secret. If you're here today in this room, you have a higher likelihood of living to be 100 for these reasons. One, most of you, I'm going to say, have financial resources to be able to access services that you need. Maybe not all of them, but the ones that most people can't, you can. Secondly, higher educated. Many of you have a higher ed level of education, high school or above. Many of you higher education than that. You are learning based. The fact that you are here is another indicator that you are very highly likely to live to be 100. And then the big one here in the US, of course, is access to health care. You have access to health care. My dad has surgery on Friday. He's coming up on a surgery for a aortic aneurysm, which is kind of scary. Yeah, it's a stent they're going to put in. And I thought about this the other day. I said, you know, he's mid-70s. He has COPD. Many of you have heard me talk about that. But he would probably die of this aneurysm if they weren't able to do this stent, right? He probably within the next few years, it would rupture. And they're going to probably be able to correct it. We don't know how Friday will turn out, but there's a real high likelihood he'll go home within a couple days. He'll be fine for several years. And that was unheard of 10 years ago. Think about that. Now, the reason that he knows about it is because he had a COPD episode where he wasn't breathing well and he went to the ER, and what did they do? They did a chest x-ray. And on the chest x-ray, they saw a aneurysm. That would not have happened in previous years. So when your parents passed of a heart attack or some other genital issue or disease process, they probably didn't even know about it in many cases, right? It just happened, and they said, well, they died in their sleep or whatever. Well, now they know about these things. They find cancer in advance. They're able to treat it. They find prostate cancer really early. They find breast cancer really early, all these things. So if you are sitting here, I'm telling you this because if you're sitting here and you're thinking, I probably won't live to be 100, I'm telling you that unless you have a terminal diagnosis right now, there is a real high likelihood you will live to be closer to 100 than you think. So just take that in. Take it in. Ask yourself, do I believe that, or am I still sitting here with my arms crossed going, she's full of crap? Because how you perceive that will determine how you plan or don't plan for the next however long. Fair enough? Okay, that was one truth bomb right on them right from the beginning. Let's do it. Okay. All right, so let's roll back. What we got on our next slide here?
Okay, so access to affordability of suitable living arrangements. So where are you going to live? The ability to manage health and healthcare needs. What are you going to do about your healthcare? It's just some things to think about since we're going to live to be 100. Creating and maintaining supportive relationships. We all know that the interactions with the people around us are important. We'll talk about that. Protecting and managing financial resources. Living life and leaving without regrets. So those are the 5 things that we're going to talk about. There's a really great book that both of us have read. Nikki and I heard about it from Nikki. Fantastic book, and it goes over these points.
Yeah, so the author of that book, David Soley, I've talked about it before in our group. It's called How to Say It to Seniors, and it's a little paperback book you can buy on Amazon. And it's really designed for people who are helping their parents who are getting older. But I think every older person should read it. I read it from both perspectives. I read it as a older adult in training, and I read it as a adult child of a parent who's getting older, because we have these communication conflicts, and that's what the book is about. Now, these predictable dilemmas, the reason they're predictable is what? That's an obvious.
Everyone will experience
right?
these items. Yep.
We know that at some degree we're all going to be there. Okay, and us included. And in here, the other thing too, last year, how many of you remember stage, not age, right? Right, so this is not about age as much as it is about stage of life. So some of you may be, Dano, my friend up there, he may be in his 70s and feel like he's 100 some days, right? And there's others of you in here that are in your 90s and you feel like you're in your 50s some days, right? So this isn't about age, it's about the stage of life we're in, but we do know that as our bodies get older, these are some of the things that we deal with. Yeah. All right, so the very first truth kind of addresses that first predictable dilemma, and I know Becky and I both have people that we can kind of refer to in these scenarios that we're going to just use as examples. And as we go through these, what we'd like for you to do is be thinking about how these apply to you or people in your life and how you can plan for them, okay? Can we plan for everything, yes or no? No. So just like I say about tornadoes in Oklahoma, we cannot possibly know if we are going to need to take cover because of a tornado. But if you live here in Oklahoma, chances are you have a what? A place, a storm shelter, a safe place, a hidey hole, something.
A plan.
Yep, exactly. And I don't ever want to have to use it, but I have one anyway because I know there's a really high likelihood I might, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and with regards to where we're gonna live, most of us want to, we want to leave our house feet first, right? Like, how many times have we heard that? We want to live in our house the whole time, and we want that for you too. The likelihood of that happening is not probably as high.
Yeah, the unfortunate part about that is that the younger people are, meaning, let's say 50, 60, and 70s, and I'm gonna say 70s, all the way up to 80. Most people do just fine in their own home. They don't really need any additional help. They might have lawn people, they might have house cleaning people, that kind of thing. And now again, trying to not generalize, but when people get into their 80s, a couple of things have happened. And this, in my research that I've done over the years for school stuff, guys, this is the reality. When people get into their 80s, here's what they tell me. Nikki, I no longer enjoy taking care of my yard anymore. Is anybody in that boat? Yeah. Nikki, I no longer want to have to deal with the pool anymore. Right? I'm kind of tired of the leaf raking. Right? Not everybody. Women in general will say, Nikki, I'm really sick of cooking. How many of you are in that boat? Yeah, right? Particularly if you're having to do that for a significant other who's retired, right?
And may have health concerns that have popped up that are difficult to change the way that you cook, right?
Yeah, and so that's exactly right. So to your point, we look at this as a priority issue, right? If you're a caregiver for a spouse or someone in your household who has additional needs, those priorities shift. Instead of taking care of the yard, you're taking care of health needs, right, or things like that. And so as a result, what happens is people will say, and I get so frustrated, you've heard me, I'm going to vent slightly, just vent. Get ready, right? AARP magazine. Any magazine. Cosmopolitan magazine. People want to age in place. Does everybody know what that means? Yes. Age in place means stay where you are. Not have to move into a what?
A home.
A home. A nursing home.
Put me in the home.
That's what people will say, right? Well, nobody wants that. But here's what's interesting. When they do that research with younger people, 60s and 70s usually is who they're surveying. And by the way, some of those, Jerry, you know this, some of these academic studies, you know who their sample group is? College students, for crying out loud. And faculty members in their 40s. And they'll ask them, would you prefer to live where you are or move to a retirement community? That's just a stupid question, right? But then when they use the same questions and they go ask people in their late 70s and into their 80s, they get different answers. You know why? Priorities change, circumstances change. And so when you read, next time you see an article on your AARP magazine that says people want to age in place, I want you to say, which people? And then I want you to look and see if you can find their research, because most of that research is on people in their 40s. Now here's the second part of the question that they don't ask. If you had another alternative that was appealing, would you move? And guess what the answer is? Yes. But in the absence of a better alternative, what would you rather do? Duh. It's a stupid study. All right. Who do you think sponsors those studies? People who own companies who help people age in place. Hello? So, the reality is your forever home, the one you're living in now, Becky, yours, mine, everybody else's in here, is probably not going to be the same place we live in forever. It might be, but it may not be. Okay? So, what happens if you need to make a change? How do you make a what? How do you make a plan? Should you make a plan before there's a crisis or after you have a crisis?
I mean, I definitely think before. I mean, years before, honestly. And I think I had a sweet person that I was working with, and she didn't have a plan, and her house was kind of on a hill, and she was trying to get from her car into her house, and her hip went out, and she lived out in the country, and she laid on that hill for a hot minute, and just, she knew she'd been having some trouble with, and by the time that happened, then other people came in and distributed her personal belongings and chose where she needed to go because she didn't have a backup plan. That's where she wanted to be. And so, I want to live in my home as long as I can, but when it becomes apparent that I can't, I want to know where I'm going. I want to know where my stuff is going. I want to have a plan for that because I have seen other people come in and have to distribute personal belongings, go pick a place. The person doesn't get to go visit that place first, and that is hard to watch. It's emotionally difficult to watch.
And it takes you out of the driver's seat.
Yeah.
She was no longer in the driver's seat.
Right. Somebody else made those choices for her.
Now, conversely, I got the privilege of interviewing one of your other clients, Professor Gregory, thank you.
He's so good.
Doug was his first name, right?
Yeah.
And he and his wife moved proactively. So maybe just share a brief bit about that decision.
Yeah, they just got to talk. They lived on some acreage, and several years before it was time for them to do that, they talked about, they kind of dreamcast it. Like, if this happens, if my health goes downhill, this is the type of community this is who we want to, which children we feel like we should live by. This is this is where we go to church, so we want to make sure that we find a place that we can afford. And they did all of their research, visited places, had a plan, and they're very happy.
Now, if I remember correctly, she was not on board with it for a while. It took her a bit to get on board.
It did take her a minute, but he was her caregiver, and so. But I think just having a conversation, she was still to the point where she was able to go look at places together, and I think that's so important.
Yeah. They did it together, and that was really a key thing. I remember too. So yeah. So on that note, just to kind of recap that point, truth number one, if intending to stay in our current residence, we need to make and communicate, not just make the plan, but communicate that plan with people that are going to help you execute it. Realistic plans for as many what ifs as possible. As many as possible, right? If this, then that. If this, then that. And that, guys, is truly a gift as well to the people in your life who are going to be tasked with that. Because in the absence of you telling them what the plan is, who has to create the plan? They do, right? And if they know ahead of time that you have a plan, then it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious, how many of you had to make a plan for someone else? They didn't have a plan, you had to make it for them. Was that fun? Was that an enjoyable experience? My parents are in the room, and I really hope that they make a plan so that I don't have to do that for them. Because it's not going to be fun.
Where are the Perrymans? Raise your hand. Right, there you are. Okay, planning in place. All right. Well, and I don't want to spend up too much time on this, but I want to share this because it's on my heart. My grandfather was in his 70s, and he had a stroke. He lived on a farm in Gary, Oklahoma, a big farm, had lots of acreage. Been there his whole entire adult life. My uncles helped him farm. When he had a stroke, he was remarried. My grandmother had passed. He had a stroke about, I guess, a year or so into his remarriage, and she left him because she didn't sign up for that. And so he had been living with her in her house in town. And guess what he had to do? Move. He had to find a new place to live. So guess where he wanted to live? On the farm. Well, he couldn't. And I couldn't live with him on the farm. I had a job and a family and all these things, and my uncle couldn't do all the things that needed to be done for him. So in our infinite wisdom, because my grandfather couldn't make this decision at the time, I decided, because I was so smart and I knew so much about senior living at the time, I didn't know anything, which is why I know more now. We moved him to an assisted living in Yukon, which was about halfway between my uncle and me. And my grandfather went downhill so fast due to no fault of the assisted living. They were fantastic. But guess what? He didn't want to be there. And then he had another stroke, and here's what he kept saying to us: I want to go home. I want to go home. And I kept saying, Papa, you can't go home. You can't live on the farm. But that isn't what he meant. Do you know what he meant? He wanted to be back where his family and friends were, which was in Geary. And at the time, their nursing home was still open. That's what they called it then. If you want to call it that now, but that's what it's
a bad word now.
It's a bad word now. Long-term care community. And so, or rehab, if you're adverse to long-term care community. But the nursing home in Geary was where he wanted to be. And I said, really? Ew. Because it stunk. And it was built in the 50s, and it was terrible. It was institutional. But that's where he wanted to be. So we moved him back there, and you know that he actually got better. And then he passed there. And he was so much better because he was around his family. But we wanted him to live someplace nice and pretty, and where they had lots of activities. And so I made the decision for him instead of him telling us this is where I want to be and us honoring that. Does that make sense? So I changed my whole perspective about how people choose where they're going to live after that happened, because I thought that shouldn't happen to people. We shouldn't put them anywhere, right? Thanks, T. All right, so I was going to say, T, we're not at a church anymore. I'd say, can I get an amen, right? Okay. But now we're here at Francis Tuttle, so clapping is perfectly acceptable. That's right. All right, so let's go with number 2, Becky. What we got?
Okay. Having access to healthcare and being able to navigate an increasingly complex healthcare system effectively are 2 very different things.
Yeah. Very different things. Yeah. How many of you love insurance? Raise your hand. Yeah, I don't see any hands. Love having it. Don't love having to navigate it, right? That's the harder part.
Thankful to have
Thank you.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. What about, how many of you love having to call your doctor and get an appointment with a specialist? Right? Oh my gosh, right? There are just things that are hard about our healthcare system. As grateful as I am that we have it and that it is fantastic, it is very difficult to navigate. Becky, have you ever had to reschedule a doctor's appointment?
I have. I've also needed to make an appointment. They couldn't get me in for 6 months. That was super fun.
Right, yeah, and then they call you the day before, after the 6-month wait, and they say, oh, I'm sorry, the doctor's gonna be out. Can we right. Yeah, so it was interesting, this whole healthcare thing, right? So Chris's dad, who you all know, passed a couple years ago after a battle with cancer, and during that end phase, when he was being treated for the cancer, he's the guy who will sit on hold forever and deal with the insurance and deal with the hospital stuff like a champ. I mean, he was like on it. But when he got sick, guess what? That's not as easy to do when you're not well as it is when you are well. And so what we notice is that a lot of people end up moving out of their home in with their family, or they end up having to make different housing arrangements, back to number 1, because of this issue. They either need easier access to healthcare, or they need somebody to help them manage their healthcare, and so they end up moving to an assisted living or long-term care because dealing with it from home or anywhere else is just too hard. And so what would happen if you had a plan for dealing with that healthcare navigation, if you will? Where's our purview, folks? Is Mike up there? Where's Mike? Mike, wave your hand up there, right? Yeah, Becky and I are so fortunate to have Mike and his team at Purview live, and if you haven't met them, I would encourage you after today's seminar to meet with them, if not today, next month, but just to find out what they do. But he and his wife are both in the healthcare field, and they have an organization that basically helps people navigate this stuff. And it's a godsend, actually, frankly, and there's not enough organizations out there that do it. So that's just one solution. In an ideal world, your spouse would do it, right? But what happens when they're not available to do it? In an ideal world, you have a daughter or son that would do it, right? But what happens when they're not available to do it? Then who does it? Well, unfortunately, has anybody seen the movie or Netflix special called We Care a Lot? Or I Care a Lot? Is it I or we? I? It's I Care a Lot. And you might look it up. It's an old show. It's been around a long time. I've talked about it before, but it's not a documentary, so it's based on a true story, but it's not real. It's fiction, thankfully, because when you see the ending, you'll go, really, Nikki? It's a bad ending. I won't spoil it. But I'm going to tell you what it's about. What did she say?
I said you just did. You just did. Spoiled it? Yeah, because it's a bad ending, so.
Well, that's a warning more than a spoiling. Because when you see it, you'll go, oh, I get it. Yeah. No, so here's the thing. If in the absence of us having a plan, guess who has a plan? The state, the county. Tara's up here, my sheriff's department good friend, right? And you all know that if someone has to take guardianship of someone, it is not a pleasant experience. And in the absence of being able to take care of yourself or having a proxy to do it, somebody else will do it, and I promise you, you will not want them to do it. And that to me is I don't like to be fear-based. I'm not a fear-based person, but I've seen that happen to too many people, and so I'm like, you have got to have a plan, and you've got to have people in place.
Yeah, I do, and I think that just the plan, right? Because we're such a society that we deal with today, but just thinking ahead, and you know, there's someone in the room that I personally know who doesn't like his wife to come with him to his doctor's appointments because then he has to do what they say. But it's so helpful because I mean I go to the doctor and they tell me something and then I get in my car afterwards and I'm like, okay, what?
Because I wrote that down.
Right, exactly. I hope the nurse can answer my questions when I call back because they just get into, you know, medical jargon, and I did not go to medical school on purpose. And so just asking those questions and having somebody with you is so important.
An advocate, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for pointing that out, and that's so critical. So a plan for future, and then also for today. Who is my other set of eyes and ears? Mm-hmm. Who is my other person? And yeah. Mr. and Mrs. Perryman, I'm sorry. And you know there's a reason why my dad doesn't come to these seminars. There's a reason. And he loves me and he knows I talk about it. Right. Yeah. So just so you know, our families are the hardest for us to educate, right? That's true for you too, right? It's hard for us to tell our loved ones that we care about them and we like for them to do something, right? We have a vested interest in it. It's hard. So if your spouse has been telling you this for a while now and you just jab them and went, see, I told you, right? You're welcome. All right, you want to do the next one?
Sure. Number 3, close relationships, companionship, and support become even more important in later stages of life. And you know, when we're talking about that survey with thirds, I would venture to say that people who are comfortable living to 100 probably have a support system around them. They're probably not sitting at home watching the news and by themselves and not interacting with people. They probably have, and there's so, you know, the food and clothing room that I know of, it's a lot of seniors that are working that because they're getting out of their home and they're volunteering. And I think the best thing to do when you start feeling down is to get out and do something for somebody else and build those relationships.
100%. We have a rule that we used to, you know, share with people when we were in their home, and they would say, you know, gosh, I really don't have a community. I don't go to church anymore because I don't drive, or whatever the case may be. We had this rule, and it was that as you get older, after retirement especially, because you lose a lot of your work connections after retirement, is that if you lose somebody, and when I say lose, here's what I mean. They may pass away, they may move away, they may divorce away, they may fade away. Whatever the case is, when you lose somebody in your life that's a close relationship, you need to replace them with 2. Lose one, add 2. The 2 that you're going to add, one needs to be 10 years younger than you. Food for thought, right? Terry, you're welcome. Right? We have some really good friends that are, there are mentors and friends and travel partners, right? And they're just enough older than us that we get to appreciate the wisdom of their life experiences that they can share with us. But we're just enough younger than they are too that they can count on us if they need us for certain things. And I think there's some security in that. And then Becky's 10 years younger than me, so she's my person. And Danielle, where's Danielle? She's my other 10 years. Right, so you're always looking at you're a caregiver for people older than you. Jerry, you talked about this, right? Being in a peer group of people that you're on the younger end of it, right? Well, who are your people, right? 10 years younger, at least, or more. Right? You don't want to go too young, because my kids are in their 30s, and I don't want them making any decisions for me. Right? I need them to be in their 40s first.
They need a little life under their belt.
I'm saying this in all sincerity, guys. Who we surround ourselves matters, right? And too many people have, I don't know, maybe just coasted along all of a sudden and then looked around and went, oh my gosh, I'm one of 3 people left in my peer group, or my family has all passed away that I was going to count on, and maybe they predeceased you unexpectedly or moved away. Now what? And that's why I love Villages. So, Villages OKC, the not-for-profit group you all know here. Is Marilyn still here? Did she have to bug out? Oh, up here. Gosh, Marilyn, hi, up there in the nosebleed section. All right. She started Villages now about, what's our timeline, 6 years ago now? Yep, 6 years ago. And it's a group of people. You have to be 50 to join, and it's a group of people who are essentially working together to help support one another. And it's not, they say it's a plan, not a place, right? It's not a senior living community, it's a group of people. And what I love about it is that it's not just social, it's educational, it's resources, it's all the things. So and then churches, of course, have their groups. Schools have their groups, but there is no excuse in our world not to have a group of people around you at all times that you can count on.
Villages OKC never ceases to amaze me, so definitely something to look into.
T is our biggest cheerleader over there. Here's the thing: when we look at the stats of the centenarians and the people who have lived to be 100, what they will tell you is. The picture that I showed earlier is what they'll tell you. It's because I am surrounded by people who are not just there to help them with their physical needs, but are there because they enjoy it. Like they enjoy being with them and spending time with them. And Chris and I have gotten in a rut, just over the last several years. We talked about it, where we come home from work and we're tired, and so you know what we do? We eat dinner, and then what do? Sit and watch TV, right? What did Travis see that? What a waste of time that is. I've seen so many reruns of 2.5 Men and Big Bang Theory. I can recite them at will. It's nonsense, right? But you know what? People used to be in groups more. They used to go out and do things more. People used to be involved in groups, and they're not as much anymore. And we've got to do that. Whether it's in the evening or in the morning, or the Healthy Living Center is a mile down the road. And there are so many different things. How many of you are members there of the Healthy Living Center? Raise your hand. Look around. Yeah, if you're not familiar with that and you need somebody, a buddy to go with, let us know. Write it on your feedback form, and we'll hook you up with somebody who is a member. Because I don't like doing stuff like that by myself the first time.
No, can I give you a trick too? There's a good trick. So Mel Robbins is an author that I like, and she has the 5-second rule. It's a fun little book, but if there's something that you, like if you know you need to get up and go see somebody, or you need to make a phone call, or you have something, you don't want to bother them, this is what you do, because you can trick your brain. If you give your brain an out, it's going to take it, right? So here's what you do. You say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you stand up and you do it. Don't give your brain an out. If you need to get up off your couch, you just think to yourself, and she says it funny. She says 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. But she does it with turning off her alarm in the morning. She does it with getting to the gym. She does it with all of those things. So if there is something that you are avoiding, please know how important those relationships are. And you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 yourself off your couch.
I hope Chris Buckaloo didn't hear that. I have a feeling that's going to come back to haunt me.
It's a great book, Chris.
He didn't need the book. He's just going to do exactly what you just said. Oh, Lordy. Okay, she also wrote a new book. Have you seen it?
I haven't read it yet, but I have seen it.
Yeah,
I love her podcast.
It's called Let Them, and it's good so far. It's it's good. Okay, it's a different topic though. Okay, so truth number 4.
Truth number 4. Scammers don't care if you have $20, $20,000, or $20 million. They will happily take it all.
Yeah.
And we don't need to get too far in the weeds on this, but I know that we've both firsthand experienced people. I had a dear lady that I was working with that she swore up and down that her boyfriend that she met online was coming to help her move to Utah. But his credit card wasn't working that day, so he just needed some help. And the bank transfer didn't work right away, so he just needed a little bit of help. Guys, it happens all the time. It happens all the time. So right now we've got a client who, she's a single lady, and she's decided that the company managing her trust is on title with her to sell her house, and it's beautiful. It's great. She's got an advocate and accountability. She has somebody to sit down and talk about her financial decisions with. And we have education partners who do that too, but it is so, she planned ahead. She did that when she bought her house. She knew she was by herself. She was going to need to make decisions on her own. And so she has a plan for when she makes a financial decision, she's got somebody in her corner with her.
Somebody at the very least to check in with.
Sure.
Right? What bothers me the most about this one is, there are scammers for sure. And again, Tara, trains and educates on this all over the city. The state even, really, or just Oklahoma County? All over? Wherever the letter coming, right? But scamming is part of it. And I'm going to contend, though, that anybody, like you said, anybody can be scammed. But there is a certain point where if someone is beginning to experience cognitive impairment, even at the mildest level, meaning, and we've talked about this before, and I'm not a physician, so I'm going to use layperson's words, but this one's a technical term they call executive functioning, right? In your brain. It's the part of your brain that controls decision making and insight. And as we get older, we are more susceptible to that failing us. It does not fail everyone. It will not fail everyone, so this is not a scare tactic, and this is not about age. This is about decline, and sadly, the older we are, the higher likelihood or prevalence of that. Now, what does that really mean? Let me give you an example. Again, a client, I was called to go to her home to talk to her. Her daughter asked us to go talk to her. They were going to sell her home and move her to a assisted living. It was actually not an assisted living, it was independent living. And so I said, okay, great. Well, that to me, when someone says that, I go, okay, great, this person's easy, to talk to. They're capable, they're able to make decisions, they're active, they're capable, all these things. And I get to this woman's home, and she had a lovely home, and we sat down at her table, and she's struggling to track with me as to why I was there. And I explained to her why I was there, and that her daughter had called her and told her why I was coming, and she just still didn't quite get it. But yes, she let me in. She was prepared to sign papers, but didn't have a clue, really, what I was there for, truthfully. So what do? I put her daughter on speakerphone, because I would never want somebody to do that without an advisor. Before I figured this out, though, here's what happened. The phone rang, and I'm sitting there at the table. She says, I'm going to take this call. And I said, sure, of course, because if you've got a doctor calling, you need to take it, right? So I'm like, take it. I wasn't a doctor. Wasn't sure who it was, but I'm listening to her side of the call, and I could hear the other person through her phone because it was really loud. talking, and they were calling to sell her gold or silver, one or the other, and buy hers. And she was negotiating with them. And they knew everything about her. They knew her grandkids' names. They knew that she had been to the doctor the day before. Like, they talked to her like she was an old friend. And when she hung up, I said, was that a friend of yours? And she goes, oh, no. She goes, I get these calls all the time about these people who want to, buy my whatever. And I said, oh, okay. And she showed me her phone, and she was having multiple conversations every day with multiple people like this. And I panicked. I'm like, oh, this is not good, right? She'd given them all kinds of dollar figures and whatnot. So I called her daughter when I left, and I said, look, I don't want to betray your mother's confidences, but I have some concerns, and here's what they are, and about the financial situation. And she goes, I'm aware. And she said, that's one of the reasons we're moving her, is because I want to disconnect her landline so that she doesn't have access to talk to people like that. And I said, well, I just want to make sure that her bank accounts are secure, because this guy could have very easily have taken her money right then and there. And she said, yeah, she said, I'm keeping an eye on them. Well, keeping an eye on them is one thing, because once it's gone, guys, it's gone. And I said, well, I hope you have an estate plan in place, some legal paperwork. And she said, well, I don't, but we're in the process of it. Well, guess what? Once someone's that far along in the process, you know how hard it is to get legal paperwork done? Right? They were a long way past, let's get this done. Does that make sense? Secondly, I want to bring up one more thing, go back to housing. I told you earlier she's moving to independent living. She has no business living in independent living, you guys. You know why? She's not independent. Does that make sense? Think about that for a second. If she can't, if I show up at her house to sell her house, her biggest asset, and she doesn't know who I am, should she really be living in an independent living setting? And so, but who's going to make that decision? And you know why the daughter didn't want to move her into anything other than independent living? Because her mother was adamant that she needed to take all of her art. And her art wouldn't fit in an assisted living room. So I'm just saying, guys, it doesn't have to be rational, right? These are the things that we need to be talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, I think just understanding our own humanity, right? That we can be taken advantage of. And talking to people. A lot of the people that I talk to that have had things happen, for instance, Shannon reminded me of one just before we started talking today about a client that we have that she gave her car away because somebody needed to borrow her car, and she gave her car away. She didn't talk to anybody about that. She wasn't in the habit of talking to her family members about that, and she thought she was being nice. And so I think just having a plan, being in the habit of having those communications, the people who we have that have been taken advantage of by people online, their family members didn't know anything about it. They did not know that mom was talking to somebody online and he was going to move her to Utah. Didn't know, because she didn't talk to him about it. So making sure that you have somebody that you can have those conversations with.
I wasn't going to bring this up, but I will since you talked about this lady. My dad actually told me that last week, and I was so grateful. He had a similar phone call. It started out as a text message. And he said it came in he said, I'm going to tell you something. And I thought, oh, Lord. Because when Dad says it that way, it's like, oh, this is never good. Now, my dad is perfectly capable. Don't get me wrong. He is perfectly capable. But he's very, very kind, and he's very, very trusting, and he's very, very small town. And so he believes the best in people, which most of us want to believe the best in people. And so he told me, he said, this lady texted me, or he said, this person texted me and said, I did not like your behavior. I'm so disappointed in your behavior. And he was like, what behavior? And so he texted them back, and he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't behave badly. And then they text him back, and back and forth and back and forth. And he goes, and then they asked me what I was doing. And then all of a sudden this person now is having a text conversation with him, as if they knew him. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. And he kept telling me the story. And then he said, I told him that, what was it? He said, I told him I had to let him go, but I could talk to him on the phone sometime. He said, I hate texting. He said, I could talk to him on the phone sometime. And he said, then my phone rang. And it was a woman, and that was the person he'd been texting with. And he said, and she had a somewhat thick accent. And that was the first telltale sign. I said, well, so what happened? He said, we talked for quite a bit, and he said, I asked her, he said, she sounded young. And he said, I don't know why you'd be interested in an old guy like me. How old are you? And she said, no, I like more mature men. And then it began, right? And it went on. And so he tells me this story. Oh, that's just the school bell. So we'll let that, it's the class change. I remember from last time we were here years ago. And so,
y'all don't get to change.
No, you guys, right? So here's what he said. He said, so Nick, I kind of got to the point where I thought this might be a fraud. And I said, I am so grateful that you figured that out, because I said, that happens a lot to people. And we'd had this conversation before, and he told me about it. And I said, what made you decide to tell me about it? And he said, I just thought you should know. And he said, just so that you're aware that I knew. Like, he was proud that he figured it out, right? And I said, well, I'm really grateful you told me about it, and I'm grateful that you figured it out. And I said, I'm glad we had this conversation, and then we let it go. But I thought, if he'd have hid that from me or whatever, and if something would have happened later, I wouldn't have known about it. I think, again, it's a weird place to be for me, right? Because he's my dad, right? He's the one that should be advising me on stuff like that. And all of a sudden now, it's like, we're in a weird place. Does that make sense? So anyway, have somebody that you can tell. If it's a friend, I know Maryland at Villages, they do that a lot. They kind of have a buddy system where if you get a phone call, a text, or a place, something in the mail or something, and you're not sure about it, bring it. And either the staff will take a look at it, or another peer, or somebody in your group will take a look. I know Tara will take a look at things. And this isn't just older people, by the way. You guys sold a house. Shannon sold a house to a good friend of ours' daughter recently, condo. I was at their house. She had her mail. She goes, hey, what's this? And she put it on the table. She's 20-something. And it was a letter from someplace in Florida telling her she owed $60-something for a deed report, I think, or something like that. Something. It looked very official. And it had a return envelope she could send her $60 with, or she could put it in on her credit card. And I looked at it and I'm like, this looks very official, but it's not. It's not. And that comes to every single person who buys a house gets one of those. You know how many people pay that? Thinking it's something that they're supposed to pay, and they don't need to pay it. How much money people are spending on things that scammers are using.
Yeah, I'm going to give you permission real quick, and I want you to keep this in your pocket for a rainy day. I'm going to give you permission. You do not have to be kind to some. You don't have to have a conversation with someone. You don't have to set them straight or correct them or tell them that they're wrong. If they call you and they want to engage you in a conversation, they want to keep you talking. So you don't have to say that's not true. You don't have to be that. If you get a text message from, I got one the other day that said, hey, let's go golfing tomorrow. I was like, nah, dude. But I did not respond to that because they were trying to engage me in a conversation. Now it could have been an honest mistake. It could have been somebody who had the number wrong. But I do not have a responsibility to correct that person because we live in a society where that's not the safest thing for me to do. And they'll figure out that it was the wrong number. So I'm going to give you permission. You don't have to have a conversation with that person. You will not ruin their day if you say no thank you. So.
And block the number.
And block that number.
Amen. All right, so let's go to the next one. This is our fifth predictable dilemma in truth. Yeah.
Okay, I love this one. I think it's my favorite. Positivity, adaptability, curiosity, and purpose are key ingredients to successful aging and leaving a meaningful legacy.
Okay, so we talked about this in the very beginning where we said living to 100, there's a high likelihood many of us will, and these are some of the ingredients, right, that go into that. But we talked about legacy in this group before, and successful aging. Let's define that. What is successful aging? If you were to throw out some things that define successful aging real quick, what would they be? Just throw them out there. Say it loud.
Staying active.
Staying active, thank you. What else? Upbeat.
Being in church.
Being in church.
Okay.
Staying healthy.
Staying healthy, okay. What else?
Being social.
Being social, okay.
Learning stuff, even if it's trivial.
Yeah, learning stuff, even if it's trivial. Right, like today, right? Good, thank you for that. What else?
Laughing.
Yeah, right, laughter. Good, what else?
If I can't play golf, I don't want to be here. If I can't play golf, I don't want to be here. But being 87 years old, I just bought a new set of clubs, and that is not a short-term decision.
That is right, yeah, sure, that's an investment, a set of golf clubs at 87. So here, Mr. Murphy, thank you for being here, by the way. I know the only reason you're here is because it is 13 degrees outside, and you can't golf today.
I had the same thought. I said, well, he's not golfing today.
No, and all those things are true. And you know, there's a trend out there in the academic world and in the social sciences world to try to define what it means to successfully get older, right? To be a successful ager, if you will. And there is no consensus on what that is. It's individual, right? What it is, being successful at 100 for somebody over here is going to be different than being successful at 100 over here. What does it even mean to be successful in your older ages? And so I don't know that I put that word in quotes because I think we all need to think about what does that look like for us, right? What does that look like for us? And for some people, if they have a health condition, it might just be not being in pain, right? But for somebody who is active and healthy, it might be golfing, right? As many times in a week as you can. It just depends. But if you don't define it for yourself, it will define you. And so whatever your plan is, we can't generalize this. We can't give you action steps to be successful at aging because we don't know what your definition of success is. Only you know that. There's a term that in that same book Becky mentioned earlier, the gentleman who wrote it, he talks about anybody and everybody in the field that they're in, whether it's an attorney or a banker or a realtor or anybody, that we are not just intended, like God didn't intend for us to just be that person in our vocation. He intended for us to be legacy coaches, if we work with people that are post-retirement. Because what he says is we can help people define what their future looks like and then pursue it, right? Instead of prescribing what their future should look like, ask people what they want it to look like and then help them craft it. How cool is that, right? And that's what we're in the business of doing. Right?
Yeah, how many of you have heard, like, failing to plan is planning to fail? And you have such an opportunity by being in this room to plan, and you have the ability to create a legacy that allows you to be remembered the way that you want to be remembered. Whether you think that that's important or not, the people in your life do. I just think about the people who have passed on and that are friends and family of mine, and knowing how they feel about things, and it's priceless to the people around you.
Yeah, and speaking of family, so my Aunt Sylvia, you guys have heard me talk about her before, moved to Spanish Cove Retirement Community at 92 into independent living, not because she wanted to, but because my uncle basically forced her to. He was her primary caregiver. She didn't have any children. Her husband had passed. She had a car accident. She had neuropathy in her feet. If we'd had Mark Cope and the nerve renewal clinics when my Aunt Sylvia was living, we wouldn't have had this problem. But instead, the neuropathy in her feet got so bad that she drove through a guard gate at a gated community and ran into two houses with her car, causing her to not be terribly hurt, but her car was hurt and the houses were hurt. And my uncle was done. And he said, you've got to go someplace because you can't drive anymore. And she said, the hell I can't. And she said, I have money and I have a driver's license and I can buy a car. And so the compromise, if you will, was Spanish Cove. She was 92, active until the day she had the car accident, sharp as a tack, and I went to visit her in her beautiful apartment and well appointed and all the things. And I said, how are you doing today? This was probably right before I came back to Oklahoma, so over 10 years ago now. And I said, how are you doing? And she goes, well, for prison, this isn't too bad. I said, really? Like, now my Aunt Sylvia and I were tight, right? Like, apple didn't fall far. I said, really, prison? I think most prisoners would be okay with this. You get 3 meals a day, you got transportation anywhere you want to go, you got air conditioning, you got all this. She says, well, she said, my legs won't let me go anywhere. She said, my legs are giving out. And I said, oh, I see. And she used a walker. I said, how many times a day are you doing physical therapy? Well, I'm not. I said, you're not? Why not? Well, because my legs don't work. I said, well, that's the point. I'm confused. That's why we do physical therapy, right? Because they can get them back. It's strength. You got to have muscle. If you don't use them, you lose them. We're having this conversation, and now I'm kind of lecturing to my 92-year-old Aunt Sylvia, and she tells me to mind my own damn business. And that's exactly how she said it. And I said, well, I don't want to hear you complaining if you're not willing to do something about it. And she said, well, Nikki, she said, when you get to be 92 years old, you can tell me how you feel about it. And she wasn't wrong. But from where I sat, she had a choice. And she had made her choice. And her choice was to sit there and die. She had made the choice. She was ready to go. And it wasn't long after that she did. She had a stroke. She ended up in assisted living and so on. But it was self-prescribed. She didn't have to go that way. She could have been more like Lois. Lois is in assisted living at 110. She's freaking doing chair exercises and yoga every day. And my Aunt Sylvia had access to that, but she chose not to take advantage of it. Does that make sense? So we all have a choice, and that's where number 5 comes in. And I will tell you that all the studies, all of them, and I have, like I said, the 2 here that I looked at most recently, and all of them say this. People who have positive attitudes, and I'm not talking about Pollyanna-ish, I'm talking about just optimistic, adaptability, willing to pivot, curiosity, purpose. Those are the key ones. Now, it doesn't matter your health. I know Perry, where's Perry at? Perry's wife, Theta, love her to death. You know, she's got some health issues, but she's probably one of the most positive people I've ever met, right? She's optimistic. Now, is every day a good day? No. When you're in pain, when you have problems, it's not always easy to be positive, but we have to make ourselves, right?
5, 4, 3, 2.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off, right? And I'm not 92 and I'm not 110, so I can't speak to being in that position, but I have had days, I think we've all had days where today might have been one of them, where you did not really want to come out in the cold, but yet you're here, right? So I'm probably, again, preaching to the choir here. So legacy is important, and so how do we leave that legacy? So we have some action items. We're going to maybe make some suggestions, yeah? Sure. And when we're making suggestions, please know, those of you who are new to this audience, let me just make a couple of comments about this since I didn't do it earlier. We are not ever here to try to sell you anything, convince you of anything, talk you into anything, none of that. That said, we do have very strategically partners that we had down here earlier that are here by design to help you put these plans in place if you need help. So we vetted them. They're people that you can trust. They're people that are not going to try to sell you anything that you don't need. And so if you find that one of these action items matches up with somebody, let us know. You can put that on your feedback form.
And I will say also, we will not give your information to that person.
Right.
So like that's
Without
not
your
what we're doing.
permission,
No,
yeah.
right. We are just telling you that there are resources here to help you
Yeah.
make a plan.
Yeah, and if you've never done this, Danielle is in charge of this. You guys met Danielle earlier. If you put on your feedback form, I would like some help with my estate plan, or I would like some help, I'd like to talk to the person you said that can help like manage healthcare issues. If you put that on your feedback form, which is the yellow form that you have, Danielle will reach out to you. She'll say, okay, this is what you put on your feedback form. I just want to make sure I understand what you want or need. And is it okay with you if I connect you to that person? And if you say yes, then she will get them that information so they can contact you, or give you their information so you can contact them, whatever your preference is. That would be the only reason that that information would exchange hands. Does that make sense? They do not get a copy of your information unless you request that.
Yeah, we are promoting the idea that you only answer the phone when you are expecting a call.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so that's where we're
There
at.
should be no random calls,
No.
not from our end.
No.
Okay, good. So let's talk about a few action items that might be helpful, just as by way of suggestion. And these are on the back of your handout. There's a place for you to write down 3 action items. And from a instructional standpoint, there is a higher likelihood of you actually taking action if you write action items down. If you don't write anything down and you leave here today, there is this much of a chance that you're going
And it doesn't have to necessarily be something that we
That's true.
specifically said. I promise you cannot stump us. So if there's something that you're working for and you're planning for, and you don't really know the resource for that, just reach out to us, because we do.
100%.
And if we don't, we'll find out.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to start with one that I know Becky and Shannon are continuing this year, that we started a few years ago, called the Oklahoma Downsizers Club. Back to truth number 1 on the housing issue. If you're thinking to yourself, I know I'm going to probably make a move at some point in the future, but I don't know where to start, and I'd like to have some people to help me with that. The Oklahoma Downsizers Club meets monthly, and it's designed for people who want to create a plan. They're not ready to do anything tomorrow or next week or maybe even this year, but they want to work with people who they can trust to create a plan. So Oklahoma Downsizers Club, you can get more information from Shannon at Seder Realty Group's table, or you can put it on the feedback form. Okay, so create a community of peers and support. That would be a really high one on my list, I think, right now especially, if you are sitting here and you're thinking, she said to have some people in my life that are can be of support to me that I'm not probably going to maybe outlive. Who would that be? So maybe you need to write down, connect with an intergenerational group, or join a group, or make a few friends, whatever that might be. That might be an action item. I put exercise down.
Exercise is good. I know that most of you in this room probably have your estate plan. Maybe it's been a while since it's been looked at. You may need it looked at. You may need to make one, so that would be a good thing to put on your list.
Right, and you guys maybe don't know this. I don't think we announced it in the beginning, so this is my way of making sure Becky doesn't sound like she's trying to sell something that we don't do that in here. But you need to know that her husband, Roberto, is an estate planning attorney. And he is one of our education partners this year.
He's all right.
He's a guy. I like him. And and for those of you who know that last year we had, Jennifer Wright has been on board with us for several years. Before that, Steve Cortez. Still fantastic people. We have absolutely nothing negative about them. People come and people go. I want you to know we have no negative things to say about that. But if you haven't, don't have an attorney and you need to meet an attorney, Roberto is a great person to meet with, see if you're fit. If you have your own attorney for, that you like, go back and have that reviewed with them.
Just have it looked
Yeah.
at. It needs to be looked at every once in a while.
And I wrote down senior living options. And guys, I know many of you are thinking to yourself, I'm going to stay where I am, and that's fine. But back to number 1 again. Concordia is one of our education partners. Legends is one of our education partners. Quail Ridge is one of our education partners. what they are set up to do, what their goal is to have people come in and take a tour, learn about their community, whether they want to move there or not. Because if you don't even know what your options are, you can't make a good decision about that. You can't. And so we do tours from time to time when the weather gets better.
I was gonna shout out Danielle, and I don't see her, but there she's in the back. Danielle would love to take you to a place to go on a tour. She'll go with you, and she's a super fun friend.
And she's in her 40s, so she could be that person.
Yeah, she could be your friend.
She can't have that many friends. Well, and so here's the other thing about going to senior living communities to take tours is that it's a very competitive industry, and they all want you to come live there. Every one of them will want you to come live there, and so they're going to do everything in their power to try to convince you that theirs is the best. And so what I always tell people is kind of like interviewing brokers. Like when you become a realtor, you have to go interview brokers. If you can fog a mirror and have a real estate license, the broker will hire you, right? Because they want as many realtors as they can get. And so as a realtor, I tell them it's your job to interview them, not let them interview you. It's the same way at senior living communities. You need to be interviewing them. You need to be talking to them to find out, do I like you? I know you like me, but do I like this place?
And there's not a universal right answer, right? Like it is so personal about what is important to you, right? Like what is important to you, and ask those questions. And then in fact, next month we're going to talk a lot about
that's right.
Plus,
yeah.
So we're excited
Good
about
plug.
that.
Yeah, because next month is
the other thing that I would say, and that kind of goes along with building a legacy, is maybe think about some people in your life that maybe you need to repair a bridge with, right? Like that can be on your action plan too. We can't control what other people do, but we can control our own attitude, and we can extend grace and lay our head on our pillow. So if there's somebody, obviously don't go into a relationship that's bad for you, but if you have someone in your life that you don't want to leave this earth in a bad place with, that's something that could be on your list.
Yeah, it's time to fix it. Yeah. I would say another one, and then we'll take some of yours to hear what you're going to put down. I would say attend as many educational programs as you can. Not just this one, and we're grateful that you're here, and we love it that some of you come every month, and we're glad that tells us that we're doing something right. But there's other ones out there that are great too. I know Villages does one every month, and matter of fact, theirs is tomorrow. So hopefully it won't snow and it'll still happen. But tomorrow, I know that different people do different topics and have different areas of expertise. So go to as many educational programs as you can. Now, caveat, minus ours and Villages, we know that they don't sell your data or give your contact information away. We know that. We can't tell you that others don't. So when you go to these others, that if you don't know, be conscientious about putting your contact information and just ask them, like, do they have a privacy policy before you give your information out? Because I don't want you to end up on some list.
Some other educational events to go to as well are our education partners will put together workshops throughout the year, and we'll let you know about those. But those are going to be really great things to attend as well.
There's actually a thing on your table with your evaluation form, and it looks, I don't know if you can see this, it looks like this. It has education partners workshops on it. And there's two coming up. One is tomorrow that I told you about with Villages, and then Becky's actually speaking with Acclaim Senior Living Community on the 29th, I believe. Yeah, 29th, about right sizing. And so that would be another good one to go to. But anyway, my point is, the more you can learn and the more you can educate yourself and take action, I think the better off we all are as we're getting older. Okay, I think we covered most of them.
You did great.
I'm going to ask them if they have, is there anybody that has an action item that they feel really good about that they want to share? Like, this is what I'm going to do when I leave here. Anybody?
Yep.
What you got?
Learn something new.
Learn something new. How often, T, are you going to learn something new?
Well, I'm going to learn piano or guitar.
Piano or guitar, I love it. Okay, good. So you're going to learn something like a hobby or something that's complicated. Yeah, good. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I worked in a bank, and one of the things that is very helpful is to look at the different levels of involvement that you can have a family member or a trusted person on your accounts. It doesn't mean that they can write checks for you. It doesn't mean that they are going to be able to access your account without you. There's different ways to do that. But it's so helpful in an emergency situation that somebody is able to help you
So know
financially.
your options.
That's great. So look at your financial stuff, look at your estate plan possibly too, and ask yourself, do I need to have somebody on these accounts?
What are my options?
Maybe not an
What are-
owner of the account, but maybe just an authorized user. That's what I am on my dad's or something like that. Yeah, that's perfect. Good. What else? Yes, sir.
Know your banker that way.
And yeah, you get to know your banker that way. Yep.
Yes, I was going to look up these books you mentioned, but I wonder if you could mention them again a little slower.
Sure. Okay, so a couple of books. So How to Say It to Seniors was one.
It's so good. Even if you work with seniors or you have a family member, it just really,
If you're taking care of an older parent, or if you happen to be older yourself, it's worth reading. Either way. And when I say older, here's what I mean. You have children that are, say, in their 50s or in middle age somewhere, because we have a communication gap, and that book talks about the communication gap. Okay. What was the other one that I alluded to? Do you know?
I talked about the 5-second rule by Mel
Mel
Robbins.
Robbins. 5-second rule. Mhm.
And it's not geared towards seniors, but it's really good for mindset.
She's a motivational speaker and author. She's really good. Yep. Okay, good. All right, action steps.
You mentioned Let Them, that book, and she was on the Today Show this morning.
Oh, she was on since this morning.
With POTUS, she was talking about
The let go theory. Yeah. So Mel Robbins she's just kind of recently come out as she's been around a long time.
She has, I believe, and don't quote me, I believe she is a recovering alcoholic, I believe. And so was an attorney, I believe, really high-powered life, and just was going the wrong direction and kind of had an awakening. And her mindset is really good. She's been through some tough things, and she has some really good things to say, which honestly, that's how we learn. But we walk through hard things and we pass it on, and that's what she's doing.
It's kind of a common sense. A lot of it's common sense, and you go, well, of course. And then you're like, well, then why haven't I been doing that? Yeah, good. Okay, any other action items? Let's get a couple more. Yeah, Herb?
You brought up the scam issue.
Yeah.
And
Talk
I would
louder.
recommend that people go as much as they can to one of Tara's programs, which you all do it, Villages does it. This is the age group that gets scammed.
Yeah, so thank you, Herb. So Herb's pointing out, if you've not been to, this is a group you can go to regularly as well, that you won't hear the same thing twice, it's always different, is are they calling them, the SALT Council is the name of it, S-A-L-T, SALT Council. Triad is the name of the group that puts it on. And they have education all over the city. It's put on by Oklahoma County Sheriff's Department, along with the Oklahoma City Police Department, and then the volunteer group that puts that together of folks, yeah.
They also have a virtual version of it through where do they do their conference at?
At Metro Tech?
At Metro
Yeah.
Tech, they actually have a virtual version of it, and anyone in the U.S. can listen.
That's great. There's a virtual, Metro Tech has a virtual version of the scam.
Tara could
That's
just
right,
speak too.
yeah.
Yes, yeah, perfect, yes. Okay, hang on, Herb. Okay, hang on, yes.
We're headed there next, 12:30 at the Edmond Senior Center. Tara will be there. For the
12:30, Edmond Senior Center, go grab lunch and then head over there. Awesome, good.
And I was just going to say, I have 6 support groups for Alzheimer's, and I hear the scams all the time.
Herb's, yeah.
We have one lady that lost $200,000.
Oh, good Lord. Okay, so Herb is uber conscientious because he is a support group leader for the Alzheimer's Association Oklahoma chapter. Herb has been doing this a long time after being a caregiver for his wife, those of you who don't know him. So it's near and dear to his heart. Guys, please, if you do nothing else, go talk to Herb about the support groups available, and if you could help spread the word. So many people don't join support groups soon enough when they have somebody in their life with some sort of cognitive impairment. And the 6 that he leads, those are the first ones I would recommend, and then if those don't fit into your life, then there are some others out there. Okay, anybody else? Okay, so let's just really quick, let me give you the next class that we're doing here next month. Becky will be having a panel of people who live at retirement communities currently. We'll be talking about their experience of that and what that's like, how they chose it, what it's like to live there, that kind of things, yeah?
Yep.
All right.
And as a reminder, we will not be in this room. I know that the stairs are a challenge, and I'm so thankful to you guys for muscling through it with us. Next month, we will be we'll be in the purple room. So seating will be easier. You'll be able to move around a lot easier. We just want to remind you of that as well.
If you came before to Francis Tunnel, we used to be here a few years ago. You come in that north entrance of the community, of the campus, and you go straight back as far as you can go, and you'll see the signs. There's a parking lot back there. It says Northwest Entrance. You'll go in that door, and the room is right there. You can't miss it. There'll be plenty of people directing you. So you'll go all the way back on the northwest corner, follow the purple signs, yes.
And there's a little cafe back there too.
There is.
So-
Actually, there's a cafe that you can get to under without having to go outside from here too.
Oh.
And you can eat lunch there, even if you wanted to as well. Yeah, Jerry?
I think you've done this before, but next month, would you bring a list of questions that if we were going to interview a
Community,
That's a great
Shannon.
idea. I love that.
Shannon will bring that and have it at her table, at the education partner table for Seda Realty Group and Buckley Realty Group, so that you guys can blend those up. Yeah, that'd be great. Perfect. Okay. Any other announcements, Becky? The Villages thing is tomorrow
Villages is
at
tomorrow.
Metro Tech, and then you're speaking on the 29th at Acclaim, and then last but not least, yeah, feedback forms.
Yeah, please fill out those feedback forms. We do use those. Danielle looks at every single one, and we covet your response. We covet your feedback. It's so important to us to be able to continue to have an event that's meaningful to you.
And write any questions that you have in the spot for that, and then we prioritize those, and somebody will get back with you to ask you more about what you need. And can we just appreciate somebody else real quick that we didn't do earlier? Casey, come up here. Casey with Francis Tuttle for letting us come back here and use our beautiful space. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, Casey is she is in fall prevention mode right now, and these ramps are steep, so if you're going down the ramps, just grab a handrail.
I had a moment.
She had a moment, yeah. Right, thank you, yes. So,
Glad you guys are here.
if you want to hold a hand, I'm sure somebody will hold your hand. Shannon is going to take your feedback forms. If you go up, Amy's going to grab them, or Shelley, or somebody.
And this elevator is working.
Oh, yay. All right, so if you need the elevator, go that direction to go down. And if you don't go up there to go out, go down to go out. So if you need the elevator, though, you go down. What else? Did we get everything? Did y'all learn something today? Give yourselves a hand.